In this video, we are going to look at applying overhead the traditional method, also known as the plant-wide, where you just use one activity to apply all overhead, versus activity-based, where you use more than one activity. It's considered to be more accurate using activity-based because you can pick an activity that would be more logical to use for the allocation of overhead. Okay, so we're given a lot of information here. We're given the absorption income statement. Okay, we produced and sold 60,400 units of product A at a price of $21 per unit. We produced and sold 12,500 units of product B at a price of $40 per unit. For the traditional cost system using a plant-wide overhead rate, we use direct labor dollars as our activity, as our allocation base. So you're given the following information for part A and B as far as material costs, labor costs, and then you're given the overhead costs for both of them. In creating an activity-based costing system, we found that 60,000 and 108,000 of the company's advertising expenses could be directly traced to product A and B, respectively. The remainder of the selling administrative expenses were organization sustaining, meaning they're common. The following distribution of the company's manufacturer overheads to the four activities is shown below. And we are going to use for activities machining, machine hours, setup hours, product sustaining, number of products, and other organization sustaining costs for our total manufacturing overhead cost. Okay, so our steps are here. Compute the product margins for product A and B under the traditional costing system. Then compute the product margins for A and B under activity-based costing system. And then we're going to compare the two methods. Okay, so we're going to start with traditional. So remember, it did say that we were going to use, in the traditional, direct labor dollars as our allocation base. So in step one, you do want to get your predetermined overhead rate. And so that would always be taking the estimated overhead cost divided by your estimated activity, which in this case, your estimated activity is the direct labor cost. So I've actually already written it out, but just to show you where I got it from, the predetermined, or I should say the estimated total manufacturing overhead is given here at $524,154. So I will use that. And then I will divide it by the estimated direct labor hours, which are given to you at, or direct labor costs, which are given to you at 163,400. I'm looking at the total column there. Okay, so when you divide that out, okay, you get an activity rate or predetermined overhead rate of $3.21 per direct labor hour. Okay, now we are going to apply that overhead based on $3.21 per direct labor hour to product A and product B. Okay, so let's start with product A. So product A, as it says up here, go back to beginning, 60,400 units sold at 21. And for product B, 12,500 units sold at 40. So I use that information, I multiply it out here. So 60,400 times $21 is 1,268,400. And for product B, 12,500 times 40 is 500,000. And we add that together for 1,768,400. Okay, for materials, all we got to do is bring down our material costs from above. So I'll go up here. Materials for product A, 40,500. Materials for product B, 162,500. For direct labor, we'll bring that from above. 120,600 for product A. And 42,800 for product B. Okay, I'll add the materials for both products, and I'll add the labor for both products. Okay, now for manufacturing overhead, remember we came up with the predetermined overhead rate of $3.21 per direct labor hour. Okay, and I just put the direct labor dollars. I'm sorry, I said hours, but I meant dollars. Okay, so I just put the direct labor dollars there. So for product A, it's $3.21, the predetermined overhead rate, times the direct labor dollars for product A were 120,600. For product B, it's still $3.21, and the direct labor dollars for product B is 42,800. Okay, I will add that together, and that does allocate the entire overhead of 524,514. Okay, now I will add the total manufacturing cost by adding materials, labor, and overhead for each one. Do the same in the total column. Okay, and then I will get the product margin by taking sales minus total manufacturing costs, and I'll do that for each one and the total column. Okay, so that is how it looks with traditional. Okay, now with activity-based, we are going to get an activity for machine hours, setups, and product sustaining. Okay, we'll come back to why I'm not doing it for the other organization sustaining in just a moment. Okay, so the first step is that we do have to get an activity rate. Okay, and we'll do that like we did in the traditional, but we will do it for each one of our activities. So it did break down the manufacturing overhead costs for each activity. So machining, if I move up here, it is the 205,000. Sorry, I got off base there. There we go. Machining 205,154. Okay, for setup hours, the estimated overhead is 157,500. And for product sustaining, 101,000. Okay, for the activity, each one has a specific activity to use. So the estimated activity here is machine hours. So if I go back, I want to use not the machine hours for product A or B, but the total machine hours. 90,100 plus 63,000 is total machine hours of 153,100. So I want to use the total machine hours. Okay, for setups, let's use setup hours. And again, I don't care about product A or B. I want to use the total setup hours of 350. And for product sustaining, number of products, I had one of A, one of B for a total of 2. So I'll use that too. Okay, so to get the activity rate, I divide the two numbers. Try this again. Okay, so I will divide 205,154 divided by 153,100. Okay, and I get $1.34 per machine hour. Okay, for setups, 157,500 divided by 350. And I get 450 per setup hour. And then 101,000 divided by 2 is 50,500 per product. So we've done my first step. Now in step 2, I'm going to allocate it. I'm going to allocate each one of these to product A and product B. Okay, I am going to do it in getting a product margin in the meantime as well. So just like I did up here, sales are actually going to be the same as when I did the traditional. Okay, so sales will be 1,268,400 for product A and 500,000 for product B for a total of 1,768,400. Okay, continuing on, I will bring down the direct material and direct labor costs for each from above. It'll be the same as when I did the traditional. Do the same for B, materials and labor. That part doesn't change, just the amount of manufacturing overhead applied to each will possibly change. Okay, now for advertising expense, it did say that they could break down the advertising expense. So this is allocated as a direct cost to each one. $60,000 for product A and $108,000 for product B. Okay, so I will put $60,000 and $108,000. Okay, now it comes time to apply the overhead for machining, setups, and product sustaining. Okay, so let's start with machining. In part one, I came up with the activity rate of $1.34, so I start with that. And then I need to multiply it times the activity for A, machining for A, and the machining for B. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll take $1.34. And for A, I look at individual product A. The machine hours for activity A were 90,100. Okay, so that gives me then, when I multiply it out, whoops, try that again. So $1.34. I put my decimal in the wrong place, is what happened. $1.34 times 90,100. Okay, for B, it's going to be $1.34, again, the activity rate, times, okay, and for machining, if I go down to the breakdown, the machining for product B was 63,000. Okay, so that ends up being $84,420. And I'll add the two together. Okay, next I'll do setups. The activity rate for setup was $450 per setup. So for product A, I will take $450 times. I'll go back up here to get the number of setups for product A, which is 80. And for product B, $450 a setup times the number of setups for product B, which is 270. Okay, and then I will add those together. For product sustaining, it's 50,500 per number of products. And for A, we just had one. And same thing for B, 50,500. And for B, we just had one. Okay. Now, again, we're not breaking down any way this other because it can't be broken down with A and B. So we just have to do the three. Okay, and I'll add these together. Okay, so now I'll add the total cost, starting with direct materials, all the way down to product sustaining. And I'll just copy that across the board. And then to get the product margin, I will take sales minus the total cost. And I will do the same across the board. But let me go back and fix. I did forget to add the total for advertising expenses. So now that's included in the total, and that's auto-corrected with my formula. Okay, for the next part of it, we are going to compare the traditional with the activity-based. Okay, so let's start with bringing down our information from the traditional. So in part one, we'll go back up. Our materials were 40,500. Our labor for A was 120,600. Okay, we'll come back to percentages. For B, materials was 162,500. And labor was 42,800. Okay, now I want to bring down the total manufacturing overhead that I applied to Part A and Part B when I did the traditional in Part 1. So in Part 1, when I did the traditional, overhead in total for Product A is right here, $387,126. And for Product B, $137,388. Okay, now I'm going to add those together for total cost assigned to the products. Okay, and then I can add them up here, product A and B together for my total column. Let's make sure that gets corrected. Okay, next I will bring down the selling and administrative expenses to the total column because it can't be allocated among A and B. So if I go to the beginning of the problem where they gave me the absorption income statement, selling and administrative expenses are given at $610,000. Subtract that out, or I apologize, add that in because that's additional expense. And when I add the total cost assigned of $1,250,914 plus $610 in selling and administrative, I get total cost of $1,860,914. Next, I'm going to get each as a percentage of the total, starting with direct materials. The total direct materials are $563,000. So what I want to do is I want to take the Part A's materials, which is $400,500, divided by the total materials of $563, and 71% of the materials go to Product A. If I take $162,500 divided by 563, let's try that again. The other 28.9% goes to Product B. So 71.1 plus 28.9 is your 100%. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the rest of them. I'll do direct labor here. Direct labor for A is $120,600 divided by the total $163,400. And for product B, $42,800 divided by $163,400. And that gives you the percentages. So you would do the same for manufacturing overhead, and you'll get 73.8. And for product B, 26.2. Now let's do our activity-based income statement. Actually from part 2, although it's the same as part 1, I'll bring down the material cost and the labor cost. And I would do the same thing for part B. I'll bring down the material cost and the labor cost. Okay, and I'll add them together. Okay, now in this case, remember it said that 60,000 of the advertising cost was directly related to part A, and 108,000 was directly related to part B, for a total of 168,000. Now I want to bring down from machining, setups, and product sustaining each of the overhead amounts that I said would be applied in part 2. So for machining, if I go back to part 2 here, it's 120,734. For setups, 36, and for product sustaining, 50,100. Okay, do the same for product B. Machining was 84,200. Setups, 121,500. And product sustaining, 50,500. Okay, I'll go ahead and put those in the total column. Now, for total cost assigned to the product, I'll start with materials and add all the way through product sustaining. Okay, I'll do the same thing for product B. And for the total column. Now, for the other selling and administrative expenses, remember when we did the traditional, we just took out the entire 610. But with the ABC, we already allocated 60,000 of the advertising to Part A and 108 to Part B. So if I take that 610 minus the 60 minus the 108, that leaves me as a common selling and administrative $442,000. Okay, I will add that on to the other cost for a total of, oh, before I get to that, sorry, I've got one more, the organization sustaining. I almost forgot that. That does need to be included here for the entire amount. If we go back to the original information, remember that 60,500. Now I can add the total cost assigned to product plus the selling and administrative plus the organization sustaining, and I come out with $1,860,554. Now, the last thing I want to do is go ahead and get these as a percentage. I would do the same thing that I did in the traditional. For example, for materials, I would take 400,500 and divide it by the total of 563,000. And for product B, 162,500 divided by the total of 563,000. Okay, and I would do the same thing for labor, and I'll just put the numbers in, 73.8. For advertising, 35.7. I would do the same thing for my indirect cost, 58.9%, 22.9, 50. And for product B, 26.2, 64.3, 41.1, 77.1, and 50%. And that finishes our comparison. Thank you very much.